Welcome to How Not to DM. I'm your host, Derek. Thanks for joining me on my quest to interview the very best dungeon masters on this plane of existence. Michael, known as Dead Aussie Gamer, or just DAG if you're pressed for time, is a DM and streamer from the west coast of Australia who's run and played in so many streamed games that he might as well be called the TTRPG Kevin Bacon. When Michael's not streaming, he's at his other job, running games for kids at his local youth center. He also played Pathfinder one time for 86 hours straight to break a record. Enjoy.
My name's Michael, I'm the Dead Aussie Gamer. I'm a Australian TTRPG performer and entertainer. I spend most of my time lying to kids, basically, because I am a local government worker in Australia and I specialize in running TTRPGs for young adults. That's what I do by day. By night, I am a Twitch streamer on not only Twitch, but other people's channels. So I've got my own Twitch. I've been on the Dungeons and Dragons Twitch page. I've been on World Anvil. I've been on Robert Hartley GM. I've been on Nerdarchy. I've been everywhere. I liken myself to that guy you watch in a movie and you have to IMDb where you know him from. That's me in the TTRPG scene, basically.
I've seen him before. He's played something in some other
guy,
show.
You know? And I always say this, you know that guy in like Real Steel who plays the cowboy villain? He also played the Blob in the Wolverine movie, that really bad one. That's me for TTRPGs, basically. It's just this guy. You're like, what is his name? I bet you're thinking that right now. Whoever's listening, yeah.
I was trying to think of a well-known actor, or not well-known, but like one who's just played a lot of roles like that, but I'll think of one later, probably in the middle of the night when I should be sleeping. All right, so very cool. You show up in a lot of places, so tell us how you got into tabletop role-playing games, and then maybe if you wanted to tell us about how you made it a career too, that'd be great.
So my story began in a very epic way, and I remember the exact date I started playing TTRPGs. It's a very rare thing because a lot of people, they remember their first game, they remember their first GMs and stuff like that. For me, it was actually during what was known as the Great Hailstorm of 2010 in Perth, Western Australia, which is my hometown. The sky literally turned green and lightning was crashing down. We had hail for the very, very first time because, I don't know if you've heard, Australia's a bit hot. We don't often get hail. Yeah, streets were flooded and cars were just basically banged up from all the hail. And that was actually the first day I started playing TTRPGs. My partner at the time, who is still with me after 13 years, had told me about Dungeons and Dragons so many times, and I was a video gamer at the time. And I was not interested in learning math. I was like, no, why would I want to do this when I could, play my video games and the like? And she then tempted me by summoning a storm, turning off the power and the lights, making it so I couldn't go outside or call friends. And basically I had no choice but to play Dungeons & Dragons. And it was my first time. And honestly, I was hooked immediately. It was an incredible adventure. It was actually a side adventure that came with the Pool of Radiance video game, the very old one. And she ran us through it from start to finish. And I had an absolute blast. I just started devouring book after book as soon as I'd finished. And next thing I know, I'm running my own game, I'm playing, I'm just addicted to this amazing creative outlet. Something about me is I like to try a lot of things. I have a very short attention span when it comes to activities, I've done almost every sport you can conceivably think of, except that weird Irish sport that's kind of like lacrosse, but for very violent people. And, I'd get to a certain point and then I'd be done. Same thing with video games, I'd play a fighting game up to a point, then I'd be done. I'd play a shooting game up to a point, then I'd be done. But role-playing games were just so adaptive and evolved as you played them and as you grow and as you learn and changed with the players and the stories. I was never bored. And even after 13 years, I've never been bored playing TTRPGs. For me, it was a calling. It was a sign that was what I needed to do and that's what I wanted to do. And I threw myself into it. It went from being a hobby very sharply to being a profession.
Yeah, good thing your partner took a few levels of druid there. Otherwise, the world would not know Dead Aussie Gamer.
Very true, very true. And you can actually look up some of the pictures too. I highly recommend it. Perth Hailstorm 2010.
Did it look like snow because there was so much of it?
If you look at photos, it was more like something straight out of an H.P. Lovecraft book. The skies were green. It was like freaking, summoning of elder gods were basically happening all over my city. Yeah, very proud of my origin story. I mean, how do you top that? Like freaking the summoning of an elder god. So good.
It is. It is, yeah. I've never seen the green sky thing, but growing up in Colorado on the east side of the Rockies, a few tornadoes and then a lot of hail actually during the summer, usually when it was hot. So kind of weird, like you're describing, but there'd be so much hail that it would look like drifts of snow. You know, there's like enough hail to cover the ground. Very cool, though. An act of God bringing you to your ultimate fate.
You know, I was also very grateful that my partner didn't give up on me for that. I was very belligerent as a kid, and yeah, she stuck by it and got me to play, and look at me now. She still has like these moments of like, what have I done? I liked D&D, and now Michael is playing games with like my legitimate heroes from the TTRPG scene, and like knows them and has them on speed dial, and like, if you ever watch the movie Gamers Darkness Rising, is one of my favorite movies of all time. By the way, if you haven't checked it out, it's by Dead Gentleman, now Zombie Orpheus Entertainment. Wonderful movie. And there's a character in it who's the GM and plays a paladin character. And this is one of my partner's favorite characters. And the actor who played that character is Nathan Rice. It blows her mind that not only do I know Nathan, Nathan attended one of my seminars at Gen Con about like how to make money or how to make revenue in the TTRPG Twitch streaming space. We became close friends, and we're close enough that like we send each other like greeting cards all the time. And we're, you know, like a couple of months ago, one of my pets passed away, and Nathan sent me a really sweet message, like, you know, checking in to see if I was okay. And it still till this day blows her mind that it's like, when did that happen? When did this person go from being like one of my favorite actors to my boyfriend's, like, you know, someone my boyfriend can very casually chat with?
Well, I guess you said you did a lot of different things, but you really dug deep quickly. So that's impressive. Yeah. It has been fun to kind of talk to my players at my table, like, oh, yeah, I'm having so and so on the show, and they wrote this adventure that we played. It's not like I just want to get up and brag about all the things I've done. But yeah, it is really cool the connections you make, right? And I think it's really fun when you meet those people and they're really nice and really easy to get along with. And I guess when you meet your heroes and they're not jerks is always refreshing. So
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. I actually that brings me very nicely to how I became a professional TTRPG gamer and streamer and all that. So basically, after I'd gotten into the hobby and stuff like that, I used to work as a engineer in a soils tech thing. It was just more of a menial job than anything else. It was menial work, and I was a trained actor, performer, entertainer. I'd done a bunch of stage shows, but I'd recently, to that point, been diagnosed with severe photosensitivity, and stage lights were actually triggering these incredible migraines, and I actually couldn't be under them for very long. And it got to the point where I'd exacerbated it to where I couldn't even go outside. I had medication, I had therapy and stuff like that. So I had to eventually pull away from performing arts and stuff like that, took on the engineering job, and it was soul crushing. It was very unfulfilling. I then got told that a young guy was going to take over my position because he was cheaper than me, and I was infuriated. They actually had the audacity to ask me to train this guy, so I was like, you know what? Nah, I'm good. You can train him. Bye. And I left, and I had no prospects. I had no way to go, and I went to my local youth center and said, look, the only skill I've got is running TTRPGs. And they said, what's that? And I then went ham. I did the talkie thing. You know, I always liken it to that situation in Finding Nemo where they're talking to the turtle. It's like, you're so cute, but we have no idea what you're saying. And they eventually said, we're going to pay you to run a program. When they said, like, hey, we're going to hire you to do this, I went, yes, please, 1,000 times yes. I've been there now for 7 years, and I'm now one of the most successful programs running out of that location. I have upwards of 30 to 40 young people coming through and playing games at the center, you know, doing all sorts of cool things. And I've always been super grateful for it. Now, I came across a situation that I could not handle, and I had no idea how to deal with it. I won't tell you what the situation was. It's very long-winded and very dramery, but, you know. So I reached out to one of my heroes, one of the people who I'd seen a lot in the TTRPG scene at the time. And that is Guy from How to Be a Great GM. I love Guy. When people say, like, oh, Matt Mercer got me into TTRPGs and, you know, Matthew Colville got me into TTRPGs, that's one thing. Now, Guy, when I say Guy got me into where I am right now, I mean he literally got me into where I am right now. So I met up with Guy and I said, hey, listen, I'm having this problem with some of my kids. I really need help. I don't think I can navigate this very sensitive social situation without someone's help. He said, I'm too busy. And I said, I got $65 for an hour of your time. And he says, okay, what do you need? So we chatted for what was a couple of hours and we just clicked. We got on like a house on fire. We talked about D&D, we talked about all this cool stuff. And then he invited me to play in his private game. So I did. It sounded like a lot of fun. I ran a ton of games and hadn't had many opportunities to play. He thought I was fantastic, and we got on even better once we started role-playing together, and he invited me to star in The Adventures of the Windswift, which was his continuation of his series, The Bacon Battalion. It was amazing. It was so much fun. I had a wonderful cast. It was my first foray back into acting and performing work, because by that stage I was like recovering from my photosensitivity, and the stage lights of like a studio weren't as aggressive as in a theater. It showed me for the very, very first time that I could do something. I could do something with all the acting and performance work that I had, and I didn't need to give up on that dream. And Guy was the one who showed that to me. After we got to, I think, season 3 of Adventures of the Windswift, Guy started moving around. We started, I wouldn't say drifting apart, but it's more like we started having different time zones, so we stopped being able to like coordinate very much.
Was he in Japan when you met up first, and then he moved back to the UK? Or
No, he was in South Africa when I first met him. Then he went to Japan. Then he went to the US. Then he went back to Japan. Then he went back to South Africa. Then he went back to he went back to Japan for a little bit longer. And then he went back to when he went to England, and now he's in London. So that boy traveled.
International man of mystery.
He is. Like, it's like, where in the world is Guy Sklanders? Like, it's where it is. So anyway, once we got to the end of that series, Guy looked me straight in the eye and said, start your own channel. And I did. And then he said, start doing stuff on Twitch. I'm going to do stuff on Twitch, and I want you to do stuff as well. And I did. And it's basically my relationship with Guy and my channel. I wasn't actually the one who even came up with the idea of my channel. It was Guy who suggested I take it to an online space, and I did. And I thrived. I mean, it's a very small and very slow-growing channel that I run. But I get to, again, perform in a bunch of different channels more than have my own, like, I don't have like a space where people come and it's like, this is like Critical Role. If you go to my channel, you'll just hang out with me. That's what you get. So yeah, that was what kicked it all off. Meeting my hero and then having him just truly believe in me was like one of the most formative things of me as a performer. Because now, many years later, that's all I want to do for people. I want to support them. I want to encourage people to step into the TTRPG streaming space. I mean, a lot of people have asked me to like mentor them during their formative Twitch days. And we're not talking about just people who are like, can you please raid my channel? And it's like, I can, but I've got 20 people watching. It's more like, hey, how do you do this? Or what are some of the, things to look out for? And I always feel like that's me passing on that good nature that I was very fortunate to receive very early on.
Yeah, paying it forward. Yeah. The Guy is a really nice person. And I mean, anyone who was willing to kind of take the time and chat with me on my show, I consider a nice person just because that's a nice thing to do. But yeah, he was particularly nice to me and very gracious, as I was gushing to him off mic about how much I loved his video series and how much it kind of influenced my early days running games too. So what a guy. And knowing that he did that for you doesn't surprise me in the least bit.
No, not at all. I actually got to play with him again this Saturday past. We did a big marathon, and I finally managed to pin him down for another game, and he did his usual thing. Like, he is a spectacular performer and role player as well as GM. Though, if you do watch any of our series, believe it when you say you can tell how close me and Guy are, because almost every chance he gets, he tries to wipe my character from existence. The start of one of our shows, I was on the gallows and I got hung. Another, I got shot. We were in a ship battle. My ship wasn't being targeted. It was my character being targeted by the ship cannons. Another one, giant dwarven ship lands on my character. It just continues onwards. I even made one for a podcast, and I was like, there's no way this character can die, because he reads comic books and he stays in the car. It's a sci-fi adventure. As long as I have this car, I'll be fine. A few minutes later, the car flips, car explodes, and now I'm just a fat Jamaican dude walking in the desert with a stack of comic books, with no gun, no formal military training or survival training. And I'm just like, God damn it.
I will have to see if I can go find that. In fact, I'll ask you for the link and I'll put it in the notes so that anyone can go check it out too. Cool. All right. So you've given us a great intro into kind of how you got into the stuff that you do. I would love to know what you feel like are some of the big mistakes you've made while running games. If you feel like there are differences between the home games and the streamed games, and then the third group, the games you run for the youth center.
As far as my branding goes, I always tell people this. I'm a great GM, not because I woke up one day and suddenly was super talented. For me, I run and play about 10 to 15 games a week, and I have done so for the last 7 or 8 years now. I have made more mistakes than I think some people will ever try playing games of Dungeons and Dragons. And so when I say this, I mean this in all earnest. Every mistake I make is something that helps me grow and helps me become a better GM, better role player. And I don't know if I could ever list them in terms of, worst, because in my own way, mistakes aren't bad. They're not something that, the worst mistake you make is the greatest opportunity for you to learn something. So I've never really put them in that regard. I've had sessions where I've had players get up and walk off the table. I've had moments where I've stood up and left the room. I've even had live streams where the actual player and cast have been just entirely toxic. I had to have massive debriefs at the end of each one with a friend of mine just because I was borderline crying at the end of each of these sessions. These are just like massive events that have happened. And you could definitely label it like a bunch of mistakes to those things. But every single one of them, I focus more on what I've learned from it. As for the difference between the mistakes made, at a home game, I think the biggest mistake people make is burnout and not recognizing it. Because we often associate our home game with our social obligations to maintain friendships. But when we do that, how much of your day is actually spent socializing with the people at the table, right? How often do you get into your own head and go, I'm running a game, I'm running a story, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I need to make sure that everyone's immersed. And, what kind of social situation involves you having that constant mindset from beginning to end of the interaction, right?
I mean, other than like a party where you invite tons of different people from different friend groups and you've got to be like moving between all of them to make sure everyone's having a good time, I can't think of another thing that I'd consider using as much brain power as running a game like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I always recommend, if you're running a home game, have like a half an hour or an hour where you're like having dinner and just catching up with these people. Then at the end, have like a debrief of like half an hour or so. Always give yourself that wiggle room for no other reason than you don't want your social relationship to fall into the obligation category where you're obliged to run a game so that everyone can have fun. And then that's all you're really catching up with people for. As for the youth center stuff, honestly, the youth center constantly challenges me, and that's one of the reasons why I've been there for so long. Kids are a whole other social dynamic. You have some kids who are just super energetic and just want to interact and involve themselves with anything. You have other kids who are so shy that they can't speak and they don't really want to step up to the plate. You have some kids who are really tolerant of the people next to them and help them out. And you have some kids who just get outwardly frustrated and get really antsy at people for taking too long on their turn. It's always evolving, it's always changing. I think the biggest mistake I made was not knowing how to introduce a girl to the group in a way that made the girl feel comfortable enough to stay long term. It's not to say that the boys were gross or they were being inappropriate or anything like that, but running the game as I ran it normally, which, I'm not saying that, I run games that are gender specific or anything like that. I run very, typical agnostic, kind of boom, this is just the game. But I felt as though because I don't have that opportunity to focus on what I need to do to introduce a young woman to TTRPGs, that I feel like I missed a few opportunities. And those for me would be my biggest mistakes, as it were. Ever since then, I've actually done a few different things for my my own approach to when a young girl does come to my program. I refer them to a couple of female performers, Amy Vorpal, Satine Phoenix. There's a friend of mine, AJ Winters, who's actually in Perth as well. I'll often use these very, very strong female personalities as an example over myself and say, hey, if you really enjoyed the game, go check out these people because these people are also really cool and really fun. That's helped a lot because, sometimes, and I mean this to all GMs, sometimes the answer is not something you can give. And it's okay for that. It's okay to, sort of maneuver things so that, someone who is more appropriate can help cater to those needs.
Yeah, that's awesome. And there are so many good examples of people out there who do a fantastic job and who play strong and incredible complex characters that you can point people towards. So that's awesome. As far as some of your favorite moments from games of yours, do you have any in particular that come to mind? Really fun, epic moments that you remember vividly, and it could be from home games or streams or whatever.
That's a rough one. I've got so many of them. I'm going to go with two. One as a player, one as a GM. As a player, one of my favorite moments was a character I played who was a plague doctor. And he spent a lot of time rebuffing the idea of magical healing, saying that one day some super virus is going to get out, it's going to be magic resistant, and society will collapse because we rely too heavily on magical healing.
Magical resistance.
Yeah, he was super fervent about that, medicine and yada, yada, yada. And I remember we had this one instance where this character was being attacked by giants. Whole group was. We were all being wounded, all being injured, and we had no cleric because, of course, this character wouldn't allow any clerics to travel with us. We had two giants remaining, and it was like a mom, a dad, and a kid. We managed to slay the young giant, as it were. And this was it. The next round, we were all going to die. I looked down at my sheets. I sat there and I was analyzing everything, thinking about any possible answers. And it hit me, right? I climbed up onto the child and I grotesquely cut off its head, presented it to the two giants. The two giants were enraged. They charged straight at me and provoked attacks of opportunity from every single party member, which wiped out the two giants before they got to me. And that was the moment I realized
Clever.
you can play TTRPGs and not roll a single dice. And that became one of my missions, is like, how many times can I solve a problem without rolling a dice? If I can solve something without rolling, amazing. And that just makes me feel awesome, makes me feel accomplished.
Yeah. Obviously, it removes the chance of failure if you can do that, right? It does take some cooperation from your DM or GM, but yeah, when you can pull it off, it's one of my favorite things when my players fool me or pull a fast one on me and think of something I haven't accounted for and then solve my problem that I've presented them with. I don't know. Those are the fun moments, right? Those are the moments where it's just like a total out of left field or a total U-turn from what you're expecting, and it's like, oh, this is crazy.
Absolutely. I think as a GM, my favorite moment that I can remember, and you're not allowed to tell him this, and he's not allowed to watch this podcast or listen to this podcast, was Robert Hartley's reaction to an event that we did in an episode of Sirens and Silver that we ran. I've been working very, very hard on this 12-episode series. It's a pirate campaign, and Rob's character is like this embodiment of this warlock with the fathomless deep, kind of patron. He'd been slowly but surely building up his fall and his descent into further and further madness at the behest of this creature. And in the last episode, that manifested in a very physical way. To see the joy that Robert had at that moment, the moment where, like a twist had occurred and it was unveiling and unfolding before him, it was just one of these very rewarding moments where I sat there and I was just like, this is what I'm chasing. This is what I'm looking for. This is why I GM. I GM because, without sounding weird, you take a knife, you stab your finger, you feel pain. To think that you could use words to create almost the same kind of physical reaction in a D&D space is such a powerful thing. And for me, when I get to see a physical reaction from my players from something that was just said, for me is just like, I've done it. You're in this space. You're there. You're feeling it. You're going for it. I've done it many times, but That's definitely the most recent one, and the one I definitely treasure at the moment the most.
So, Robert, you can start listening again.
You can unblock your ears, mate.
Welcome to Quickfire Chaos. The way this works is you're going to roll on these 4 different tables that's going to tell you some information about an NPC and then what quest the NPC is looking to have done. And then I'm going to roleplay some random character who will show up and then ask you, hey, I've noticed the quest that you put on the board, or, so-and-so told me that you needed something done, and then you've got to send us on the quest and kind of fill in the blanks about why you need us to do this thing and what it's for and where we can find it, blah, 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 that kind of thing. So, yeah, just meant to be like 2-minute little snapshot of roleplay to kind of show off your skills.
All right, let's do it. Okay, here we go. My first number is 35.
Sometimes repeats a word in their sentence like a skaven. I don't know what a skaven is, but I'm just going to say you sometimes repeat words in your sentences.
So the next one is 25.
Okay, your job is a rat catcher. Kind of crazy. Okay. Last thing is your personality.
8.
Audacious, recklessly bold, in defiance of convention, propriety, law, or the like. Insolent, brazen, disobedient. Wow.
Okay.
A lot of good synonyms in there. Lastly, the fetch quest on which you will send us. Or me.
69.
Nice. A potion. You are looking for a particular potion. I'll let you decide what the potion is and why you need it. I've played a bunch of wizards and paladin fightery types, so I'm going to do a druid this time. So I'll be in like a long brown cloak, and I'll have a gnarled staff with leaves growing out of it, typical druid things. Okay.
You find yourself in an old apothecary. The smell of licorice and herbal remedies seem to permeate through the air as you speak to what looks to be a very, very red-eyed rat person. Patches of fur missing from their limbs as you kind of look him up and down, but coated in the leathered, oiled garbs of an alchemist of some kind. An assortment of potion bottles dress the table in front of him as he looks to you with his beady eye.
Come to see. Yes, come to see. Step forward. Step forward. Tell. What is name? What is name?
Yes, I am Madville.
Not important.
Sorry?
I need something. Come close.
Yes.
It needs Death Knell Lotus. Yes, magical potions. Kills many. All will die. Might be slightly illegal. Slightly.
So this is something we should acquire through back channels, is what you're saying, dear friend.
No, back channels. People talk. Shh. Then they will find I. Find I is bad. You must journey to the Withering Woods. There, seek out the Old One. The Old One. She has her ways, yes.
And she can provide us with this Death Knell Lotus which you seek.
What? No! She knows where you can find. Yes.
Sorry.
Bring back Death Knell. But be careful. Do not touch, do not smell, and definitely do not eat.
Do you have some sort of container in which we might place this sample so that we don't unwittingly poison ourselves?
Yes. What you take I for?
He pulls out a bucket and places it.
Clink.
There. Do you have a lid? I noticed some of your nice glassware with corks, perhaps?
He looks at the glass and he sort of does this twiddly motion with his fingers as he miserly reaches for one of the large bottles. He prepares to put it in the bucket, then stops and looks at you. He puts it down and then picks up a small triangular bottle, about half its size, and then goes to put it down, and then stops and looks at you. He puts it back down, and he takes out a test tube, and eventually he puts the test tube into the bucket as well.
Is this how much you need? Will this be sufficient?
Yes, yes, yes. Even one small drop could kill a whole city.
Well, we shall take the utmost care then, and I assure you we shall return your glassware. I notice you seem quite attached. Anyway, what is your name, good sir? If we may need to tell the ancient or wise one of the Withering Woods.
Call me Phyllis.
Phyllis, yes. Thank you, old chap. It's been something. We will return with this death knell. What can we expect as payment?
Payment? Payment? Yes, yes, payment.
He looks at the wall behind him. He then takes out this glowing red potion. Inside is this swirling pearlescent liquid that gives off a strong magic aura. He takes it down and looks at it, then looks over his shoulder at you, then looks at the potion, then looks back at you, places it back on the shelf. He then moves down to the smaller potions and eventually opens up a small drawer where he pulls out a clay pot.
He says, "This pot." Yes.
Yes, what does it do?
You see, pot always full. Yes, yes, the pot is always full. If you pour from this end, you have acid. You pour from this end, honey. Don't confuse the two.
I believe I can tell the difference by sight and smell, yes. Well, this is quite the item. I think we have come to an accord, my friend.
Yes, yes.
He reaches out this kind of sweaty, very, very scaly palm towards you. He only has 3 fingers and a gnarled thumb.
All right, I'll go in for the shake then, and then as we're leaving, like wipe my robes, wipe it off on my robes, and plan to clean it off later.
Very well. As you leave the store, you hear this as he says,
"Nice fellow. Shame he's going to die."
As he continues.
Nice. I don't know what I expected. Perhaps I should, as a druid, make sure that I'm not committing mass genocide with what I'm doing. But you gotta get gold where you can.
Sometimes it's better to provide a rat catcher with a potentially town destroying potion than it is to not be able to eat that night.
Yes. Cost benefit analysis. All right, so let's transition to some of your work within the space and your professional work as well. So first of all, reading through your Patreon page, you started off with Ask a Pathfinder as a Facebook page as kind of like your very first introduction into, I guess we can call it, creatorhood. Tell us kind of how you started there and how it has evolved into what you're doing now.
Honestly, Ask a Pathfinder was sort of a dead end. It started out entirely because my work with the kids and stuff like that, as well as some troublesome players here and there, led me to answer very dumb questions all the time at my table. Eventually, I just got so frustrated that I started writing a blog about these questions. People would ask me a question, I would give them an answer, and I would write a whole thing about it. And then I would say, never ask me this again. I don't want to hear that question. Go read the blog. And they did. And eventually these blogs slowly sort of became like these kind of little articles, some fun little games that I kind of ran. I did like just a bunch of stuff that made me happy and of course entertained the small community that I was with. It was around the time that I was doing that, the whole stuff with Guy happened. And I was Ask a Pathfinder for quite some time. It wasn't until Guy got offered to do a show for the Dungeons & Dragons official Twitch channel. He reached out to me and he basically said, I want to invite you as a cast member, but obviously for D&D, you can't invite someone called Ask a Pathfinder. So a few months prior, I did a huge rebrand because as much as I love Paizo, I love Pathfinder, they weren't supporting my channel in any tangible way. I appreciate like free modules here and there, but I can't pay my rent off free modules. And D&D was willing to pay me for my actual time as a performer. So I left Ask a Pathfinder behind, which I hope hadn't burnt too many bridges, from the Pathfinder side, because like I said, I love Pathfinder, and I still do. But yeah, so once I left that behind, I took on the Dead Aussie Gamer name. For me, Ask a Pathfinder is a very apt example of what Pathfinder was like at the time for me as a content creator. I wanted to create content that people needed, something that wasn't necessarily easily accessible. And Pathfinder First Edition was kind of, in a lot of ways, prohibitive in terms of how much you needed to know to really dive into Pathfinder. So Ask a Pathfinder just made sense, not only as a name, but as what I was doing. But yeah, I kind of likened it to like running around with a fire extinguisher going, it's not that bad! Shh! It's actually really cool, it's really fine. Just some people are really crap. And that was basically it. I don't regret moving on. Neither do I regret the time I spent focused on Pathfinder stuff. It gave me a lot more insight into other systems. So now I don't just have a D&D game. I don't just have a Pathfinder game. I look at tons of indie games, some non-D20 games, even non-dice-based TTRPGs as well. It opened up my, I guess, repertoire to start from a place that wasn't necessarily D&D and evolve into who I am now.
Very cool. Someone told me that you hold the unofficial record for the longest TTRPG game. So tell us why? Why did you do this? What game was it, and how did it go? What was that experience like?
I don't even remember why I decided to do it.
Was there another record out there, I guess, to start?
Not for TTRPGs. So the previous record was set at 80 hours, which was the one that I was competing against. And I believe it was for something called the Goose Game. It was just basically this roll of dice and move this goose around the board, and they did that for like 80 hours, which was insane to me. But I petitioned them to do a world's longest TTRPG, but they wanted it as the board game stuff. So I decided to represent, and I ran a Pathfinder adventure module, Rise of the Rune Lords, which is probably one of my favorite Pathfinder modules, and it's one that I've run so many times, I knew it like the back of my hand. I did all the prep work. I found out, like roughly how long I'd be able to run this game. I put together a team of wonderful people who I knew I could spend that period of time with, and it was pretty much off and running. I guess for me, I wanted to do something that was different, something that not many people, if any, could be able to achieve, And I treated it like a Guinness World Record attempt. I didn't sort of go, I'm just going to rock up on the day and just play games. We had like 6 months of training, diets, sleep measurements. I visited an actual college of sleep. Yeah. Well, no, we actually had to do the whole like training for it because
it's just so ludicrous to me.
Absolutely. I think the hardest bit was the dieting, because basically we all had to, with the exception of one person, had to basically cut down our sugar intake by a substantial amount because we intended to do a secondary boost in the last 12 hours with sugar being introduced, and it would have a higher impact if we didn't have a tolerance to those sugar boosts already in our system. So yeah, it was just like lots of little things like that. I found out that like at the 90-hour mark is when really bad side effects start to happen. So that's why I set it at the 86-hour mark. I was like, 86 hours is good. We've got like 4 hours to, go and, like basically collapse wherever we happen to be. But yeah, that was the origins of where it began. The experience itself was surreal, is the only way I can describe it. There were so many ups and downs. It was like, honestly, you could make a movie out of it. Started off really strong. One of the players decided that we didn't need to take our scheduled break. We could just plow on, and kind of janked up our timing a little bit, which is one of the issues we had with some of the paperwork later on was, we scheduled these breaks for a very good reason. That threw off our timing a little bit. And then at some point or another, I lost my voice partway through. And so I had to actually get like some really super strong throat numbing agent to like continue onwards. By the time we hit like the hour 70, I think, there's footage of me literally just on my feet swaying and running games with my eyes closed. I'm fairly sure that I entered like this kind of Zen Nirvana state where I was just running the game off like autopilot. I could not honestly tell you what happened, but there was even a moment where I sat there and I realized, like, you know those cartoons where that guy like sits on a mountain and then you see the sun just sort of, whiz
Yep.
past? So we had a skylight that was above where we were playing. Like, it was a huge skylight. And I'm not joking. I was watching it move. It felt like that. It felt like I was just watching just time move past. It was nuts. It was very, very nuts.
How long did it take you to recover after doing that to yourself? Also, I did the math just because I know a bunch of people like me are going to be interested. 3.5 days, roughly. So, yeah.
I disappeared for 3 days. Almost 3 days. I think I woke up just to go to the bathroom, have a shower, and that was about it. But beyond that, like, apparently my partner couldn't wake me up to eat properly for those 2 days. Like, she basically sat me up and fed me noodles, which was very kind of her. And that was basically it. It's like, no, Michael, you need to eat stuff. But that was also one of the big things as well, was that we had an amazing support staff that I had organized with a bunch of people. So we had people who were bringing us food and making sure everything was prepped and making sure that everyone was staying healthy and hydrated. We had a medical officer who was there as well, ensuring that we all had what we needed, because one of our players also was diabetic as well. When I say it was a legit attempt, I mean, like, I didn't mess about. Like, it was a 100% legit Guinness World Record attempt, and nothing frustrates me more than the fact that what brought us down ultimately was the paperwork more than anything else, which is why it still remains the unofficial record for world's longest board game, because 85 hours is not 86. It's very close, though. And by the way, I want to say this, though. Those guys who currently have the 80-hour record, the 85-hour record, honestly, I 100% have mad respect. I know what it takes to get there.
My friend has always been trying to get me to play the Dune board games, so I'm going to have to tell him only if we play for 87 hours, and we'll see
Beautiful.
what he says. Yeah. Oh, man. You've mentioned a few. You've kind of done some name dropping as we've been talking, but you've played with a ton of different talented people in your time in the kind of streaming space, including some past How Not to DM guests who you've mentioned, Robert Hartley, Guy Sklanders. So who have been some of your favorite people, maybe other than those two, to share the table with so far? And then maybe one or two people who you would love to play with who you haven't gotten to yet.
I think my favorite person to play with at the moment is Quincy from Quincy's Tavern. Like, I love Quincy so very much. Like, next to Robert and Dredd, who are my members of my stream team, I'd say that probably my next favorite person to play with is Quincy. Like, if Quincy asked me to do anything, I'd be like, yeah, they're in a heartbeat. He's just got this wonderful synergy with my particular play style. Doesn't matter what we're doing, I know we're in for a good time. I think following that, I'd say that the team from Perception Studios, which are a cast of felted friends who play D&D, these guys are also very, very performance heavy. They're hilarious. They're just so much fun. Again, we can't tell Cucumber I said this, but Cucumber is definitely always a riot, and I always end up laughing more than I ever intend to at games that he's in. And lastly, probably Jameson Stone. Yeah, Jameson Stone is just such a very creative individual in the TTRPG space. There's just so much depth to how he role plays, and it challenges me as a GM because those are the kind of characters you can really kind of sink your teeth into and like delve into some backstory stuff and delve into some really cool adventure-y stuff. And yeah, Jameson's never really disappointed. As for who I'd like to play with, who I haven't yet, probably top of that list, tippy tip top of that list is I would really like to play with Becca Scott and Matthew Lillard. I think those two would just be a whole lot of fun to play with. I'm trying not to say Matt Mercer and Brendan Lee Mulligan because that's an everyone answer. It's like when someone says, "How do you kill a vampire?" You kind of stake them through the heart. And it's like, yeah, but who doesn't that kill?
Yeah, I've always wondered about that. Anyway.
So yeah, I mean, look, those two are very obviously, they are very, very talented. And they're like, honestly, I think more than anything, I'd like to GM for them, not necessarily like play with them. Like, I'd love to play with them, but like, I'd love to GM for them. And I think the other one, freaking Terry Crews. Yes, 100%.
Oh, Terry Crews. Good answer.
Love to play with Terry Crews. Oh my god,
that'd be so fun.
Oh, that would just be a fun time, flat out. Like,
yeah.
Terry brings the fun. I love that. Yes, Terry Crews, Becca Scott, and Matthew Lillard. Yeah, those are
good answers.
My top three. Yeah.
I will accept those answers. Cool. If you had to boil down your best advice for people running games system agnostic and, situation agnostic, what are kind of like the one or two pearls of wisdom you have for people out there to encourage them and give them advice?
I tell this to everyone, especially streamers, because I think this is the single most important thing you can give to people. Your current game will never get any better than it is right this second. The previous game you have played will always be worse than the one you're running now, and your next one will always be better. Never forget that, because we can sometimes criticize so heavily on what we've done wrong and how miserable things are, but it's a fleeting moment. A single game does not define how we are as a game master or how we are as a player. If you see something that you think you can grow from it, Don't get attached to it and don't try to find reasons and rationale for why things went wrong. Accept that something went wrong and make a difference. In the future, do better. And always remember that your past is somewhere that you've traveled from, not where you still are. You're not just spinning your wheels. Every game adds to you as a role player.
I love it. And honestly, a big part of the reason why I started the show, right, is to learn from people and to try to just get a little bit better every time you're running games. So awesome. Last but not least, where can people find you, interact with you online? And then do you have any cool upcoming streams or projects that you want to share? And let me tell you when this is coming out, just to give you some context, because that will be helpful. Either the first or second week of July, if you've got stuff around then that's happening.
My name's Michael. I'm the Dead Aussie Gamer. You can find me on twitch.tv/DeadAussieGamer, where I run a variety of different shows for Patreons of my channel. And you can also find me on a whole bunch of different shows throughout the internet. It is honestly easier to Google me, but if you want to see some of my best work, I've recently done a marathon game, 12-hour session with Robert Hartley GM and the Dreaded GM, who you can find me there quite frequently. I'm also one of the stars of Ghosts of Saltmarsh, Call of the Kraken, Descent into Avernus, Blood Wars, and of course, The Adventures of the Windswift, as well as Broken World Chronicles, etc., 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 a whole bunch of other stuff. Again, Google is your friend. If you want to come and hang out with me, come check out my Twitch channel, because we do a lot of audience interaction materials. A lot of the stuff we do is just going to involve you coming and just enjoying everything that we love about TTRPGs.
Amazing. Thanks so much for taking the time, Michael. It's been awesome to get to know you a little bit better and learn about all of the cool and crazy things that you've done. And I know it's not easy to find time in a busy schedule like yours, because you're literally doing stuff all the time. But yeah, I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.